You were told that the Enlightenment freed you. That reason had finally triumphed. That the darkness of superstition, the shackles of religion, the tyranny of monarchy had all been shattered by the rising sun of intellect. But Immanuel Kant, the philosopher most closely tied to the Enlightenment itself, warned us of something darker. He said, "Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity." That sounds liberating. It sounds heroic. But if you look deeper, there's a tragedy inside that phrase. Because Kant wasn't just talking about the freedom to speak, to think, to reason. He was pointing to something much harder, the terrifying responsibility of becoming truly autonomous. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want that responsibility. They say they do. They wear the costume of modernity. They talk about freedom, rights, and progress. But in their core, they still beg to be guided. They still want to be told what is good, what is true, what is allowed. They have traded one master for another. In Kant's time, it was the church. Today, it is ideology, algorithm, approval. You have not been freed. You have simply changed the shape of your chains. Kant wrote that immaturity is the inability to use one's understanding without the guidance of another. It is not ignorance, it is fear. The fear of thinking for yourself, the fear of being wrong, the fear of isolation. And so people remain in their cages, not because they are locked in, but because they have become comfortable with the walls. He said this immaturity is self-imposed, not because people lack intellect, but because they lack courage. Have the courage to use your own reason. That was the motto of the Enlightenment. But courage is rare, and without it, reason becomes nothing more than a tool, wielded by others, imposed by systems, diluted by convenience. The Enlightenment gave birth to many things: democracy, science, industry, capitalism. But it also birthed something else, a new kind of conformity, a rational conformity, where the soul is no longer shackled by dogma, but by data, where obedience is no longer enforced by divine threat, but by societal pressure, economic systems, and psychological manipulation. The Enlightenment did not free us. It restructured the prison. It gave us new vocabulary, new rituals, new idols, but the same fear still rules the heart. The fear of being truly alone with your own mind. Kant was a man of rules, of structure, of discipline. He believed in moral law. He believed in duty. But even he feared what happens when man becomes too proud of his progress. Because reason without moral grounding becomes cold, and freedom without internal sovereignty becomes chaos. He warned that true freedom is not doing whatever you want. True freedom is living by the law you give yourself, not the law that flatters your instincts, the law that disciplines them, that refines them, that elevates them. But look around you now. What is modern freedom? It's indulgence, it's consumption, it's distraction. You are free to say anything, and yet terrified to speak your mind. You are free to choose your path, and yet paralyzed by options. You are drowning in information and starving for meaning. And so, like in Kant's time, you return to comfort. You obey, not the priest, not the king, but the feed, the trend, the false consensus of digital applause. You do not think, you echo. You do not reason, you repeat. And you call this progress. Kant believed that the public could become enlightened only when individuals took responsibility for themselves, not in theory, not on paper, but in the quiet of their private lives, in the way they chose their principles, in the way they honored truth, even when it was inconvenient. But enlightenment has become performance. It has become spectacle. You post your beliefs, but do not examine them. You declare your values, but do not live them. And in this hollowed-out echo chamber, we have mistaken noise for knowledge. We have mistaken expression for understanding. We have mistaken rebellion for freedom. And what's worse, we have redefined truth, not as something to seek, but as something to curate. You are not encouraged to think. You are encouraged to react, to consume, to align, and in that alignment, you lose yourself, because you never truly knew who you were. Kant warned that the greatest danger to enlightenment was not the oppressor, but the self who no longer wants to be free. And that is where we are. A world that celebrates individuality, but punishes dissent. A world that promises freedom, but enforces uniformity through psychological coercion. You were not meant to be this. You were not born to follow. You were born with reason, yes, but also with will, with soul, with the capacity to question not just authority, but yourself. And that is where Kant's vision remains relevant. Because his idea of enlightenment wasn't about knowledge. It was about transformation. It wasn't about comfort. It was about confrontation. He knew that truth was not something you inherit. It is something you earn through effort, through discipline, through moral clarity. He wrote of the categorical imperative: act only according to that maxim by which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. That sounds abstract, but it is radical. It means that your actions are not just yours. They echo into the world. They shape the moral fabric of society. You are not isolated. You are responsible. And that responsibility is sacred. But what has modernity done with it? We have outsourced our morality. We have delegated our ethics. We no longer ask, is this right? We ask, is this allowed? Is this acceptable? Is this trending? And in doing so, we become children again, obedient, reactive, afraid. Not because someone made us afraid, but because we never learned how to carry the burden of our own freedom. Kant believed the Enlightenment had begun, but he knew it had not finished. And looking at the world today, it's clear it never did. We still crave leaders who will tell us what to believe. We still cling to ideologies like lifeboats in a storm. We still fear silence. We still fear solitude, because solitude is where the mind begins to speak. And most of us are not ready to listen. We fear freedom because freedom demands self-governance. It demands we create our own meaning, that we become our own authority, that we align ourselves not with the world, but with a higher law. And that is terrifying. It is easier to conform, easier to obey, easier to belong to a cause than to become a cause. But Kant never promised that enlightenment would be easy. He only promised that it would be worth it. Because the alternative is death in life, a society of echoes, a soul reduced to preference, a mind trained to avoid pain, avoid conflict, avoid truth. He lived in an era when the world was just beginning to question power. We live in an era where the questioning has become theater, where rebellion is commodified, where dissent is curated, where everything has been flattened into content, and the soul, the real soul, has been buried under layers of distraction. Kant would not call this freedom. He would call it self-deception, the illusion of autonomy. Because to be truly free is to govern yourself, not with impulse, but with principle. It is to ask yourself hard questions, to examine your motives, to confront your contradictions, to hold yourself to a standard that no one else enforces, and to do it even when no one sees. That is freedom. That is maturity. That is enlightenment. And that is what most people are running from. So don't tell yourself you're free because no one tells you what to do. Ask yourself this: do you know what you serve? Do you know what you believe? Do you know who you are when no one is watching? That is the test. That is the mirror. And that is what Kant tried to hand us. Not a destination, but a direction. Not a finished truth, but a method. The courage to reason. The strength to act morally. The willingness to think beyond yourself. That is what we have lost. We have kept the symbols of the Enlightenment, but forgotten the substance. We talk about freedom, but are terrified of responsibility. We idolize reason, but refuse reflection. We claim to value truth, but bend it when it's inconvenient. And until we return to the inner work, until we reclaim the courage to be fully human, not algorithmic, not performative, not tribal, but conscious, moral, and free, we will remain in the very immaturity Kant warned us about. The Enlightenment didn't free us. It gave us the tools to free ourselves. But tools are useless if you're afraid to build. Freedom is useless if you're unwilling to grow. And reason is dangerous if it's not guided by conscience. So choose, not loudly, not with slogans, but quietly, in your thoughts, in your actions, in your private moral decisions. That is where freedom lives. That is where the Enlightenment must begin again. Not in books, not in systems, but in you, in the fire of your integrity, in the silence of your own reason, in the law you write in your own soul and choose to obey, not because you must, but because you know it is right. That is the burden of being truly free. That is the weight of being awake. And that is the path we must walk, not once, but always. Not to become enlightened, but to become whole.